Welcome to the Stellar Vault. Say hi in the comments to awaken the archive. Then like, subscribe, and let the tale begin.
The Crick's guard jabbed a shock prod through the bars. Marcus didn't flinch. "Look at it," the guard clicked to the three dignitaries behind him. "The last of its kind, extinct. Yet here it sits, breathing our air, eating our scraps." The dignitaries were Dominion officials, tall, robed figures with smooth gray skin and too many eyes. They studied Marcus the way one might study a preserved insect. Curious, disgusted, amused. "It seems smaller than the record suggested," one of them said. The broadcasts showed them fighting, screaming. This one just sits. 3 months in the cage, the guard said. They break, even the savage ones. Marcus sat cross-legged on the cold metal floor, wrists chained to bolts behind him. His prison uniform hung loose on a frame that had once carried 30 more pounds of muscle. His beard was matted. His eyes were steady. He was counting. 14 seconds since the guard entered. Plasma sidearm on the right hip, safety disengaged. Sloppy. 3 joints visible in the neck carapace where chitin plates overlapped. The prod's battery indicator showed 60% charge. The dignitaries carried no weapons. The nearest alarm panel was 9 meters down the corridor, mounted at Crick's shoulder height. "Can it speak?" another dignitary asked. "It can," Marcus said. The dignitaries stiffened. The guard's mandibles clicked in irritation. "It speaks when spoken to," the guard said. "Otherwise it stays silent. We've trained it that much." Marcus looked at the dignitary who'd asked, held the gaze. The dignitary had 7 eyes arranged in a crescent across its forehead, and every single one looked away first. "Fascinating," the dignitary murmured. "The defiance remains, even now." "Vestigial," another said, "like a severed limb that still twitches." The third dignitary stepped closer to the bars. This one was older, its gray skin mottled with age spots. It studied Marcus with something that might have been genuine curiosity. "You understand what you are?" it asked. "What your species was?" Marcus said nothing. "Chaos," the dignitary continued. "Entropy given flesh. Your kind spread across 47 worlds in less than 3 centuries. You fought everything, including yourselves. You built weapons that could crack planets and used them over territorial disputes. You were a disease. And now we're cured," Marcus said. The dignitary's lipless mouth curled. It leaned closer. "Now you're a footnote, a curiosity in a cage. The galaxy is quieter without your kind. Safer, more ordered." It paused. "Does that bring you pain? Knowing you're the last? That when you die, your entire species becomes nothing but a cautionary tale?" Marcus looked at the dignitary, at the 7-eyed one, at the third who hadn't spoken, then at the guard with the shock prod and the sloppy weapon discipline. "Ask me again in a week," he said. The guard jabbed the prod through the bars. Current arced through Marcus's shoulder, locked his muscles, dropped him sideways to the floor. He didn't scream. He'd stopped screaming after the first month. The dignitaries watched him twitch. Then they lost interest, the way all of them eventually did. They murmured their thanks to the guard and glided away down the corridor, robes whispering against the deck plates. The guard spat through the bars. The saliva hit Marcus's cheek. "Extinct, savage!" the guard clicked. "Should have glassed you with the rest." Then he left. Marcus lay still until the footsteps faded. Then he sat up, wiped the spit from his face, and went back to counting. The detention deck held 600 prisoners across 4 cell blocks. Marcus had memorized all of it. Block A, Silari. 47 of them, tall and willowy, their bioluminescent skin dimmed to barely a glow. They'd been poets once, philosophers. Now they huddled in their cells and made no sound. Their light only flickered when they dreamed, and even their dreams had grown dim. Block B, Grom. 112 laborers, gray-skinned and massive, built for work that would kill smaller species. They sat in perfect rows in their communal cell, shoulders hunched, eyes empty. Centuries of breeding had made them docile. They worked, they ate, they slept. They did not hope. Block C, mixed species. Political prisoners, failed rebels, anyone the Dominion wanted forgotten but not dead. Most had been here longer than Marcus had been alive. Block D, Vex. Only 9 of them, kept separate from the others. Engineers, technicians. Too useful to kill, too dangerous to trust. Their multi-limbed bodies never stopped moving, fingers clicking, limbs tapping, always calculating. They'd refused to share their FTL technology with the Dominion. This was their reward. Marcus's cage sat at the intersection of all 4 blocks, maximum visibility. He was the exhibit at the center of the zoo. And from his cage, he could see everything. The Cricks worked in shifts. 6 guards per rotation, 4 rotations per day cycle. They changed at the same times. 6 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 18 o'clock, 24. 00 by the ship's chronometer. Between shifts, there was a 4-minute window when the outgoing guards had left their posts and the incoming guards hadn't yet arrived. The security feeds had blind spots. The camera at Junction 7 had a 3-second lag when it panned left. The motion sensors in Corridor 12 had been malfunctioning for 6 weeks. The guards had reported it, but the requisition for repairs was still pending somewhere in the Dominion's bureaucracy. The slave collars on the prisoners could be triggered remotely, but the signal had a range limit, 40 meters from the nearest relay. The lowest deck had only 2 relays, both near the guard station. Marcus had counted every step, every second, every gap in the system. 3 months of sitting in his cage like a broken animal. 3 months of letting them poke and prod and spit. 3 months of watching. Tonight, the count was done. The Vex engineer's name was Crixatal. At least, that was the closest human phonetics could get to the clicking sounds he made. He'd been watching Marcus since the first week. Not with fear, not with contempt, with something else. Marcus had seen it before, back on Earth. The look soldiers got when they were measuring a situation. Calculating odds. Crixatal had 8 eyes arranged in 2 rows across a wedge-shaped head. Right now, 4 of them were fixed on Marcus's cage. Marcus met the gaze, held it. Crixatal didn't look away. That was interesting. Night cycle came at 22 o'clock. The lights dimmed to 10%. The guards retreated to their station at the far end of the deck, leaving only roving patrols. The prisoners were expected to sleep. Marcus waited. At 22:47, it happened. A Grom in Block B collapsed, massive body hitting the deck plates, the sound like a sack of wet concrete. The other Grom didn't move, they never did. But the Crix guards picked up the commotion on their monitors. Medical emergency protocols. 2 guards dispatched from the station. The roving patrol diverted to assist. For exactly 47 seconds, the corridor outside Marcus's cage was unwatched. He'd timed it 6 times before. Same window, same duration. The Crix were nothing if not consistent. Marcus moved. The chains on his wrists were tight, but his hands were smaller than they'd been 3 months ago. Malnourishment had its uses. He braced his left palm against his right thumb and pushed. The joint popped. Pain flared white-hot, but he dislocated worse. He pulled his right hand through the cuff, skin tearing, blood slicking the metal. 31 seconds left. He worked on the ankle restraints. The bolts were sunk into the deck plate, but the plate itself was old, stressed metal. He'd been putting pressure on the same spots for weeks, tiny movements that looked like fidgeting. Now he pulled. The bolt groaned, shifted, came free. 14 seconds. He was half loose when he heard the footsteps. Wrong rhythm. Wrong timing. The patrol was coming back early. Marcus froze. One hand free, one still chained. Ankles loose, but no time to stand. The footsteps grew closer. Single guard. Light tread. Young, probably. The veterans had a heavier gait. The Cricks rounded the corner and saw Marcus with blood on his wrist and a bolt in his hand. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the guard reached for his plasma sidearm. Marcus had the chain in his free hand before the guard's fingers touched the holster. He lunged forward, ignoring the chain still attached to his left wrist, and looped the links around the guard's throat. The Cricks' mandibles clicked in alarm, but Marcus was already behind him, knee in the guard's back, pulling the chain tight into the gap between neck plates. The guard thrashed, strong, trained. But Marcus had been fighting since before this one had been spawned. He knew how bodies worked, how they broke. He found the soft spot where chitin met flesh and pulled until he felt something give. The clicking stopped. The guard went limp. Marcus lowered the body to the floor. No sound, no alarm. He checked the corridor. Empty. The other guards were still dealing with the collapsed Grom. He searched the body. Plasma sidearm. 3-shot charge, just like he'd observed. A keycard for the cell block doors. A compact communicator that he crushed under his heel. 20 seconds since the guard had died. Marcus looked up. Across the corridor, Crixatal was pressed against the bars of his cell, all 8 eyes wide. 4 of his limbs were trembling. But he wasn't calling for help. He wasn't making a sound. He was waiting to see what happened next. Marcus popped his thumb back into joint. The pain barely registered. He checked the plasma sidearm's charge one more time. 3 shots. From the far end of the corridor, he heard voices. Multiple. The night patrol was returning. 6 guards, standard formation. They'd find the body in less than a minute. Marcus looked at the sidearm, at Crixatal, at the corridor stretching away into the dark. 3 shots, 6 guards, 1 half-starved human with no armor and no backup. Back on Earth, the instructors at Camp Pendleton had a saying, "If you find yourself in a fair fight, you've already screwed up." Marcus smiled. His broken teeth caught the dim light. Nothing about this was going to be fair. Tut. Marcus moved toward the footsteps. Every instinct from boot camp said to find cover, establish position, wait for the enemy to come to you. But boot camp assumed you had backup, ammunition, time. He had none of those. What he had was darkness, a 3-shot pistol, and the knowledge that Crick's guards had never fought a human before. They'd seen the broadcasts. They'd watched humanity die from orbit. They thought they knew what humans were. They didn't know anything. The junction ahead was narrow. Maintenance access. Pipes running along the ceiling. Conduits boxing in the walls. Bad terrain for a 6-guard formation. Perfect for one man who didn't mind getting close. Marcus pressed himself into a recessed doorway, controlled his breathing, listened. Chitin clicking on deck plates. 4 sets of footsteps now. 2 must have stayed with the collapsed Grom. Better odds. Still bad. The first guard came around the corner. Marcus shot him in the face. Plasma discharge lit the corridor white. The guard dropped, mandibles shattered, carapace cracked open. The 3 behind him froze for half a heartbeat. Loss of unit. Assess threat. Their training protocols cycling. And in that half heartbeat, Marcus was already moving. He grabbed the dead guard's body, used it as a shield, and charged. The second guard raised his weapon but couldn't fire without hitting his fallen comrade. Marcus slammed into him, drove him back into the third guard, and they all went down in a tangle of limbs and chitin. Close quarters. No room to aim. Perfect. Marcus dropped the corpse and hammered his elbow into the second guard's throat. Cartilage crunched. He rolled off before the third guard could pin him, came up with the shock prod he'd taken from his first kill, and jammed it into the gap between the guard's helmet and neck plate. The Cricks convulsed. Marcus held the prod until he smelled burning. 2 down, 2 left, 1 shot remaining. The surviving guards had retreated. Smart. They'd found cover behind a support pillar 10 meters back. Plasma weapons trained on the corridor. Standard defensive position. By the book. Marcus smiled. Humans didn't fight by the book. He raised the pistol and fired, not at the guards, but at the light relay mounted on the ceiling above them. The plasma bolt shattered the housing. Sparks rained down. The corridor went black. Cricks had compound eyes, excellent motion tracking, wide field of vision, terrible in low light. Their species had evolved on a world with 3 suns. Darkness was not something they understood. Humans had evolved in caves. Marcus moved through the black like water through a pipe. He heard the guards clicking frantically, mandibles rattling distress signals, firing blind into the dark. Plasma bolts scorched the walls. None came close. He took the first one from behind, arm around the throat, blade of his hand finding the nerve cluster behind the mandibles. The guard spasmed and dropped. The second spun toward the sound, weapon raised, and Marcus was already inside his guard. He caught the Crix's gun arm, twisted, felt the joint give. The guard shrieked, a high clicking sound that echoed off the metal walls, and Marcus silenced him with a knee to the thorax and a sharp twist of the head. Silence. Marcus stood in the dark, breathing steady. 4 guards dead, 2 still at the medical emergency. Minutes before they noticed the patrol was missing. He retrieved a keycard from one of the bodies. Then he moved. Block D's control panel was a simple interface. The Dominion liked standardization. Marcus swiped the keycard. The system chirped acceptance. Cell doors hissed open. The Vex didn't move. 9 engineers, 8 eyes each, all of them fixed on the human standing in the corridor with blood on his hands and 4 dead Cricks behind him. They'd seen violence before. They'd never seen anything like this. Crixatal was the first to step forward. His limbs were trembling, but he moved. "You killed them," he said. His voice was clicks and whistles, but Marcus had learned enough in 3 months to understand. 4 guards, alone. 6 more on this deck, Marcus said. More coming. You want to stand there, or you want to live? Crixatal's eyes shifted to the dead guards, to the empty pistol in Marcus's hand, to the corridor stretching away into darkness. "We cannot fight," he said. "We are engineers. We build. We do not—" Marcus reached down and pulled a toolkit from the nearest dead guard's belt. Standard Crix maintenance kit. Cutters, welders, diagnostic probes. He tossed it to Crixatal. "Then build something." Crixatal caught the kit. His limbs stopped trembling. For a moment, something flickered in those 8 eyes. Not hope, not yet, but something adjacent to it. Memory, maybe. The ghost of who he'd been before the cage. He turned to the other Vex, clicked something sharp and fast. 2 of them moved forward. The rest pressed back into their cells. 3 Vex. It would have to be enough. "The collars," Marcus said. "Can you disable them?" Crixatal was already moving toward a wall panel, his limbs working faster than human eyes could track. "The control relay for this deck is in Junction 12, 40 meters from here, if I can access the primary conduit." "How long?" 3 minutes, perhaps 4. From somewhere deeper in the ship, an alarm began to wail. "You have 2, Marcus said. Junction 12 was a maintenance hub, a cramped space where a dozen power conduits converged before routing to the upper decks. Crixatal and his 2 engineers worked in silence, their limbs a blur of motion, splicing and rerouting and doing things Marcus didn't understand. He didn't need to understand. He needed to keep them alive long enough to finish. The 2 remaining Cricks from the medical emergency had found the bodies. The alarm they'd triggered was local, Deck 7 only, but it was enough. Marcus could hear them calling for backup on their communicators, voices clicking in rapid bursts, panic underneath the discipline. Good. Panic made people stupid. He positioned himself at the junction's entrance. One shock prod, half charge remaining. No firearm. The corridor stretched 30 meters to the nearest cover. Bad terrain for defense. He waited anyway. The first cricks came fast. Too fast. Riding on anger and adrenaline. Marcus sidestepped the plasma bolt, closed the distance, and drove the shock prod into the guard's weapon arm. The pistol clattered to the deck. Marcus caught it before it hit the ground, spun, and fired twice into the second guard's chest. The first guard was still standing, arm twitching from the shock. Marcus hit him again and again. The cricks dropped. "How long?" he called back. 90 seconds, Crixatal answered. His voice was steady now, focused. An engineer with a problem to solve. Marcus checked the pistol's charge. Empty. He tossed it aside and picked up the fallen guard's weapons. 2 pistols, 6 shots total. The communicator on one of the dead guards crackled. A voice, cold, precise, definitely command rank, spoke in rapid cricks. Marcus didn't understand all of it, but he understood enough. Reinforcements, heavy weapons. 2 minutes out. Crixatal. Working. Work faster. The collar relay died with a soft electrical pop. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Marcus heard it. A sound he hadn't heard in 3 months on this ship. A sound he'd almost forgotten existed. A Grom was screaming. Not in pain, in something else, something raw and primal and older than language. Marcus moved back through the corridors toward Block B. The Vex followed, their limbs clicking nervously, tools clutched like weapons. The Grom cell was chaos. 112 laborers, each one massing twice what Marcus did, were on their feet. They weren't organized. They weren't fighting. But they were moving, pacing, flexing, slamming fists against walls. The slave collars around their necks were dark, dead metal instead of glowing compliance. For generations, the collars had punished every aggressive thought, any flash of anger, any instinct toward resistance. The Grom had been conditioned so thoroughly that most of them had forgotten they'd ever been anything but docile. But the body remembers what the mind forgets. One Grom stood apart from the others, older, scarred. His gray skin was latticed with the marks of 100 punishments, and his eyes held something the others had lost. Memory. "You," Marcus said. The old Grom turned, looked down at the human, this small, blood-covered creature that had somehow killed 6 Crix guards and broken the chains that had held his people for centuries. "I know you," the Grom rumbled. His voice was deep enough to vibrate in Marcus's chest. "The extinct one. The trophy." "Not extinct," Marcus said. "Not a trophy. Not anymore. What are you?" Marcus met the old Grom's eyes, didn't look away. "Angry," he said. "You?" Something shifted in the old Grom's face, the ghost of an expression that hadn't crossed those features in decades. "Gorvak," he said. "My name is Gorvak. My father's father was a warrior, before the collars, before the breaking. Can you fight?" Gorvak looked at his hands. Massive, thick-fingered, built for labor, but also built for other things. "I remember how," he said quietly. "I thought I had forgotten, but I remember." Behind him, other Grom were listening, watching, waiting to see what the old one would do. Gorvak turned to face them. When he spoke, his voice filled the cell block. "The collars are dead. The guards are dying. And this human, this last human, asks if we can fight." He paused. Let the word settle. Our ancestors would be ashamed that he had to ask. Silence. Then one Grom stepped forward, then another, then a dozen. Not all of them, not even most, but enough. Marcus looked at the small army forming around him. 12 Grom, 3 Vex engineers, 1 human against 20 Crick's guards with heavy weapons, against an automated prison ship with millions of prisoners and an AI that had never experienced a real uprising. Bad odds. He'd had worse. "The reinforcements are coming from the upper decks," Marcus said. "Stairwell access at Junction 4. It's a choke point. They can only come through 4 at a time. If we hold it, we control the flow." "And then?" Crick-Satal asked. "Then we take the guard station. The station controls Deck 7. From there, we can access the ship's secondary systems." "You want to take the entire ship?" Marcus looked at the Vex, at the Grom, at the corridor stretching away toward the sound of approaching boots. "I want them to understand something," he said. "Extinction isn't a fact. It's a dare." Gorvak made a sound deep in his chest. It took Marcus a moment to realize it was laughter. "I think," the old Grom said, "I am going to enjoy this." The reinforcements arrived 90 seconds later. 20 Crick's guards in full combat armor, plasma rifles, shock grenades, a squad leader with enough kill marks on his carapace to make him senior staff. They came down the stairwell expecting panicked prisoners and one troublesome human. They found a barricade. The Vex had worked fast, rerouted power conduits, welded deck plates together, created a wall of metal and sparking wire that blocked the corridor completely. Behind it stood 12 Grom, who had remembered what their ancestors knew. And in front of it stood Marcus Kane. The squad leader's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "1 human," he said. "You killed 6 of my guards, freed some prisoners, and built a wall. Impressive. Futile, but impressive." "You're right," Marcus said. "1 human. Last of my kind. Nowhere to run, nothing to lose." He smiled. "You really want to see what that looks like up close?" The squad leader raised his rifle. Marcus moved. Plasma fire turned the corridor into a furnace. Marcus hit the deck behind the barricade as bolts screamed overhead. The Cricks weren't aiming anymore. They were saturating, pouring fire into the choke point like they could melt the metal itself. "Hold!" Marcus shouted. The Grom didn't need to be told. They pressed against the barricade, bodies hunched, waiting, patient. The way their ancestors had waited in the mines before the breaking, before they'd forgotten what they were. The plasma fire stopped. Capacitors cycling. 3 seconds to recharge. "Now!" The Grom moved. Gorvak was first over the barricade. He hit the nearest Cricks like a landslide, 400 pounds of gray muscle driving the guard into the wall. Chitin cracked. The guard's rifle discharged into the ceiling. Gorvak grabbed the guard's head and twisted until something gave. Behind him, 11 more Grom poured through the gap. The Cricks weren't prepared for this. Their training was built around suppression, overwhelming force against unarmed prisoners. They had protocols for riots, procedures for resistance. They had nothing for a species that had remembered how to be savage. Marcus moved through the chaos like a ghost. He'd lost his weapons in the first exchange. It didn't matter. A Cricks stumbled backward from a Grom's blow, and Marcus was there, catching the guard's rifle as it fell, reversing it, firing twice into the gap between thorax plates. 2 more guards went down under Grom fists. Another tried to retreat and caught a thrown piece of debris that caved in his faceplate. Then the Cricks found their footing. The squad leader barked an order, sharp clicking sounds that cut through the noise. The surviving guards tightened formation, covering each other, rifles tracking in coordinated arcs. A plasma bolt caught one of the Grom in the chest. He went down hard, smoke rising from the wound, and didn't get up. Another bolt hit Gorvak's shoulder. The old Grom staggered, gray skin charring black, but he didn't fall. He roared, a sound that belonged to a different age, and kept coming. "Fall back," the squad leader commanded. "Fighting retreat to the station." The Cricks withdrew, disciplined, professional. They left 8 of their own dead on the deck plates and took their wounded with them. Marcus let them go. "Why?" one of the Grom demanded. Blood ran down his arm from a graze. "We can finish them!" "They're going where we need them to go," Marcus said. "The guard station. Most defensible position on the deck. Once they seal those blast doors, they think they're safe." "They are safe," Crixatal said. The Vex engineer was crouched behind the barricade, all 8 eyes wide. "The blast doors are rated for ship-to-ship combat. We cannot breach them." Marcus looked at the engineer. "You helped design the station's systems." "Before my capture." "Yes." "Is there a back door?" Crixatal's limbs clicked nervously. "The AI core that controls the station can be accessed through maintenance conduits. A hardline override. If someone could reach it, plant a device, I could force the doors open remotely." "Where are these conduits?" 40 meters of ductwork. Narrow. No weapons. If they detect movement, I'll go." Gorvak's massive hand closed on Marcus's shoulder. The grip was gentle, but it stopped him cold. "No," the old Grom said. "Someone has to—" "Not you!" Gorvak's eyes held something Marcus hadn't seen before. Not anger. Not fear. Respect. "You are why we fight. The human who would not die. The one who broke the collars." He shook his head. "If you die in a pipe, what happens to the spark? It goes out." "Then who?" A shape moved through the group of Grom, smaller than the others, younger. He couldn't have been more than adolescent by their standards, gray skin still smooth, unmarked by scars or age. "I will go," he said. Gorvak turned. "Tor, I am the smallest. I will fit where the others cannot." Tor's voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. He looked at Marcus. "I have never known anything but the collar, never known what my people were before. You showed us. Let me show you what we can become." Marcus held the young Grom's gaze. He'd seen that look before, on soldiers about to do something they knew they might not survive. The calculations were already done. The choice was made. "Crixatal," Marcus said. "Give him the device." The ductwork swallowed Tor whole. Marcus watched the maintenance hatch close and turned back to the corridor. 12 Crix guards in the station. Blast doors sealed. Automated defenses online. They had maybe 10 minutes before the command deck sent more reinforcements. "We wait," he said. Gorvak stood beside him. The plasma wound on his shoulder had stopped smoking, but the flesh beneath was ruined. He didn't seem to notice. "The young ones," the old Grom said quietly. "They don't remember the before. Their fathers didn't remember. Their fathers' fathers wore the collars from birth." He paused. "Tor was born in a cell on this ship. He has never seen a sky." "He'll see one," Marcus said, "when we take this ship." "You believe that?" Marcus didn't answer. Belief was a luxury. He dealt in odds and actions. 3 minutes passed. 4. Then Crixatal's device beeped. "He did it," the engineer said. His limbs were already moving across the portable console he'd salvaged from the dead guards. "The hardline is active. I can access the station's systems." "The doors." "Overriding now." At the end of the corridor, the blast doors groaned. Hydraulics whined in protest. Sparks flew from the seams. The doors opened. "Go!" Marcus shouted. The Grom charged. Marcus ran with them, rifle in hand, into the guard station. The Crix were ready. Barricades, overlapping fields of fire. The squad leader in the center, plasma rifle raised, mandibles clicking commands. The first Grom through the door took 2 bolts and fell. The second made it further, reaching the nearest barricade before a guard put him down. But the third and fourth crashed into the Crix line like battering rams, and the careful formation collapsed into chaos. Marcus went left. A guard swung toward him, and he dropped, slid on the deck plates, came up inside the guard's reach. The rifle was too long for close work. He used the butt to crack the guard's knee, then reversed it as the Crix fell, and fired point blank into the thorax. Another guard came at him, then another. He killed them both, but took a hit to the ribs. Not plasma, a blade of some kind. The pain registered distantly. He kept moving. The squad leader appeared in front of him. This one was different. Older. The carapace was scarred with a dozen battles, and the eyes that fixed on Marcus held something beyond training. Experience. Intelligence. "The extinct one," the squad leader said. "I read your file. 3 combat tours before the purge. 67 confirmed kills. Commendations for valor." "You missed a few," Marcus said. The squad leader raised his blade. Ceremonial, curved, sharp enough to split atoms. "Your species died screaming. I watched the broadcasts. Billions of you burning. And here you stand, one small creature, thinking you can change anything." "I already did." The squad leader lunged. He was fast, trained. The blade moved in precise arcs that Marcus barely dodged, each swing calculated to cut off escape routes. This wasn't rage, it was craft. Marcus took a cut across his forearm, another along his side. The pain was a distant thing now, pushed down where it couldn't interfere. He watched the squad leader's patterns. The rhythm. Everyone had a rhythm. The blade came high. Marcus stepped inside instead of back, caught the squad leader's arm, and drove his forehead into the Crix's mandibles. Chitin cracked. The squad leader staggered, and Marcus tore the blade from his grip. One thrust, up through the gap beneath the thorax plates, into whatever the Crix used for a heart. The squad leader looked down at the blade in his chest. His mandibles clicked once. Surprise, maybe, or something like respect. "Extinct," he whispered. "Not yet," Marcus said. He pulled the blade free. The squad leader fell. Across the station, the last guards were dying. The Grom showed no mercy. After generations of collars and cages, they had none left to give. Then Marcus heard the shot. He spun. Near the AI core access panel, a Crix guard had survived, wounded, dragging himself across the floor, plasma pistol in hand. The guard wasn't aiming at Marcus. He was aiming at Crixatal. Tor moved faster than thought. The young Grom threw himself between the guard and the engineer just as the plasma bolt discharged. The bolt took him center mass. His body jerked once, twice. Marcus shot the guard through the head, but Tor was already falling. Gorvak reached the young Grom first. He gathered Tor in his massive arms, cradling the boy like something fragile. The plasma wound had burned through flesh and bone. Nothing could survive that. Tor was still breathing. Barely. "Did it work?" he asked. His voice was a whisper. "The doors. Did they open?" "They opened," Gorvak said. "You did it. You saved us." Tor's eyes found Marcus. The human knelt beside him, ignoring the blood running from his own wounds. "I never saw a sky," Tor said. Is it like they say? Blue." Marcus thought about Earth, about skies he would never see again, about clouds and sunlight and all the things the Dominion had burned. "Yeah," he said. "Blue, and sometimes orange at sunset, and sometimes gray when it rains." Tor smiled. It was a small thing. Fragile. "I would have liked to see it," he said. Then he was gone. Gorvak held him for a long moment. The other Grom stood silent. Even the Vex stopped moving. Finally, Gorvak set the body down gently. When he looked up, his eyes were dry. The Grom didn't weep, but something in his face had hardened into stone. "What now?" he asked. Marcus stood. The guard station was theirs. Banks of monitors showed feeds from across the deck. Communication systems blinked ready. "Now we send a message." Crixatal's limbs moved across the console. Ship-wide broadcast. Every deck, every cell block, every screen. "Do it!" The monitors flickered. Then Marcus saw his own face reflected back at him. Battered, bloody, standing in a captured guard station surrounded by freed prisoners and dead Crix. He didn't have a speech prepared. He wasn't a politician or a general. He was a sergeant from Earth who had survived too long and lost too much. So he said the only thing that mattered. My name is Marcus Kane. I'm a human. My species was declared extinct 18 months ago. He paused. Let it sink in. The Dominion was wrong. Across the ship, millions of prisoners watched. Solari in their dim cells, Vex in their isolation blocks, Grom in their labor base. Species that had been broken for generations. Species that had forgotten what it meant to resist. They told you hope was dead. They told you fighting back was impossible. They put collars on your necks and cages around your lives, and they made you believe this was all you could ever be. Marcus looked directly into the camera, into the eyes of every slave on the ship. They lied. I'm standing in their guard station. Their soldiers are dead. Their collars don't work anymore. He leaned forward, and I'm just getting started. He let the silence hang. You can stay in your cells. Wait for them to regain control. Go back to being what they made you. Or you can remember what your ancestors were, what you still are, underneath the conditioning and the fear. Behind him, Gorvak stepped into frame. Then the surviving Grom. Then the 3 Vex engineers, tools in hand. Deck 7 is ours, Marcus said. Join us, and we'll take the rest. He reached for the console. The Dominion called my species extinct. I'm going to teach them what that word really means. The feed cut to black. The response was immediate. On Deck 12, a group of Solari prisoners overwhelmed their guard and seized his weapons. Their bioluminescence blazed bright enough to light the corridor. On Deck 4, Vex engineers disabled the collar relays using tools they'd hidden for decades, waiting for a moment that had never come. Until now. On Deck 9, the Grom Labor Battalion stopped working. 200 massive bodies standing motionless as their overseers screamed orders that no longer carried any weight. The command deck tried to respond. Lockdown protocols, lethal countermeasures, the AI systems that had kept the ship running for centuries without incident. Nothing worked. Crixatal looked up from his console. I created a virus. It's spreading through their systems right now, using their own architecture against them. How long before they regain control? Hours. Maybe less. But by then, the engineer gestured at the monitors. Riots on a dozen decks. Guards falling back. Prisoners advancing. By then it won't matter, Marcus finished. He turned away from the screens, walked to where Tor's body lay. Knelt beside the young Grom, who had never seen a sky. Gorvak stood beside him. He was the youngest of us, the old Grom said. He never knew anything else. He knew enough, Marcus said. He knew what freedom was worth. Did he? Marcus looked at Tor's face. Peaceful now. Young. He died for people he'd never met. For a future he'd never see. For the chance that someone else might look up and see that sky. Marcus stood. Yeah, he knew. Gorvak was silent for a long moment. My people will remember him, he said finally. The first of us to die free in 300 years. We will carve his name into the stones of our homeworld, if we ever see it again. You will. You believe that? Marcus looked at the old Grom, at the fires spreading across the monitors, at the ship full of slaves who had finally remembered they could fight. I know it, he said, because this is what humans do. We break things that can't be broken. We survive things that can't be survived. And when someone tries to wipe us out, he picked up a fallen rifle, checked the charge, turned toward the door. We make sure they regret it. The command deck was 40 levels above them. The AI was failing. The guards were scattered. And across the Veil's mercy, millions of prisoners were discovering something the Dominion had spent centuries trying to destroy. Hope. Marcus walked out of the guard station. Behind him came Gorvak and the Grom, Crixatal and the Vex, and somewhere on every deck, thousands more were rising. The Dominion had called humanity extinct. They had forgotten what extinction really meant. Not an ending, not a silence, not a species vanishing quietly into the void. Extinction was a fire that burned everything it touched, a reckoning that no empire could outrun. A single human, standing in the ashes, still breathing, still fighting, still refusing to die. The galaxy had wanted humanity gone. Now it would learn. It was never going to happen.